welcome back. We are here with Robin Thomas in another one of our Vox Populi from the conference. Robin, how have you enjoyed it so far?
Been brilliant. A very hectic schedule, fantastic organisation, a lot of hard work behind the scenes, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Are you presenting?
I did this morning.
You did this morning. How did it go?
Yeah, pretty good. I did a few rehearsals in the last week or so. It seems to have been exactly within the 20 minutes, which was my main concern, not overrunning.
You know, it's funny. I've had repeated comments from other historians that the way they know that we're military historians is we always stick to time. At which point I say, you don't know the same military historians that I do.
Well, everyone likes to overrun on their favourite topic.
Absolutely.
Right? And particularly when you've got an audience and there's people in front of you, and it's very tempting to kind of rabbit uncontrollably.
Yeah.
So that all has to be kind of reined in.
So can you tell us a little bit about what you're working on right now?
I am basically into military administration on the British side of things during the 18th century. So my first book from 2 years ago was the administration of a British expeditionary force going to Flanders in 1793. So how did it actually function in the field? Looking at the staff, who they were, what did they do, the different departments in headquarters, the commissariat logistics, the medical logistics, the state and condition, the training of the regiments and the regimental officers, and similar for the ordnance as well. So in other words, the army arrives plonk in the United Netherlands. How does it actually function once it gets there? Not so much on the fighting at all.
Fair enough. What do you think of Hugh Davies' argument that the British Army can best be viewed as a projectile fired by the British Navy?
Well, it was. I mean, we're on an island.
Yeah.
And you can't escape from that. So if you're going to do something which isn't a civil war, then mainly you have to go overseas, and that has to be escorted by somebody. So, yeah, I think so. Obviously, the longer conflicts last for, possibly the less relevant that becomes, because that remark implies a kind of coastal raid, more than something like what turned into the Great War on the Western Front, for example. I don't think by 1915, let alone 1918, the soldiers would have regarded themselves as being there courtesy of the Royal Navy.
Please God, let us get back on those ships.
Yeah, exactly.
So are you building on this logistics work? Are you sort of moving chronologically or subject-wise, or what?
No. Well, as I mentioned, what I'm really interested in is military administration. And when I say that, I don't mean top-down administration, looking from the point of view of, say, government departments in London, because a lot of that work still needs to be done, but there has been a lot done on that already. What really interests me is how forces functioned at the very, very basic level. So where did the victuals, if you're in the Royal Navy, where did they come from, and what did people actually eat on board ship, for example? Things like patronage, the role of patronage with officer promotions. In the naval context, the concept of followers and patrons, who could be captains or flag officers, for example. So the work I'm doing at the moment, I'm sort of gearing up to put finger to keyboard on a second book, which will be looking at naval administration during the middle part of the 18th century, looking at some of these themes. So I have a subject, and I want to look at things from the point of view of a deck officer, what came across his field of vision. During this guy, I'm not going to tell you who it is, but he had a 40-year career in the middle part of the 18th century. So, and he participated in all the conflicts during that period.
Wow.
So, War of the Austrian Succession, particularly in North America, capture of Louisburg and what have you, and then the 7 Years' War and the War of American Independence as well at the very end of his career. So I'm going to explore a number of different themes to do with the individual and to do with the ships that he served on as well.
That sounds spectacular. Almost a single-person micro-history biography, but that tells a story of the entire British Navy in that period.
it's what I would like to do, and my idea, to be honest, my ideas are forming at the moment, and I know this kind of chronologically predates the podcast and what have you. But I mean, the one thing I found doing the first book on the Duke of York's expedition is that without the context of looking at what went on before, because a lot of the senior officers, in fact, in Flanders, I would say not even the senior officers, your middle-ranking officers, the captains and so forth, had served in America. So if you don't know the modus operandi of what they did in America and how they administered an expeditionary force, I mean, things like payment of bat and forage money, for example, and they're scurrying back at the Treasury to dig out documents that relate to the previous war, because the current clerks and people don't know.
Yeah.
So there's always that sort of precedent. So I personally feel, and this is just me talking here, that to understand the British Army in the Napoleonic period, you really do need to look at what went before it and not be put off by the kind of dark shadow of Wellington and Napoleon, because they weren't there. Well, Wellington was in the Low Countries briefly in 1794, but not in a significant capacity. But because those principal actors on the scene in the French wars were not active, let's say, then people think it's not important. And actually, what went on then has many parallels before and since about how you mobilize a national effort, military effort, for example, and the development of all the aspects that go towards the expeditionary force functioning. So the development of staff, army staff, for example, which is getting a lot more formalised by this period. But it's nothing like what Wellington would have had in the Peninsula. And a lot of the departments are still civilian.
Absolutely.
So, for example, the Commissariat, they're City of London merchants, basically, who are experienced guys because they know how to cut business, do deals. And so a lot of that is subsequently militarised, and a lot of lessons are learned. Things like army transportation. The army doesn't go anywhere without the horse, and wagons and what have you, but it's all civilian at this time. Similarly with the medical. They're not wearing uniforms. They are, apart from regimental surgeons who will have a commission, but the general hospitals and the physicians and all that are more, I was going to say, pulled in from the street. It's not quite that bad, but
you look like you can use a saw.
But they have private practices at home.
Yeah.
They are not 100% dedicated to the army. So a lot of this is militarized because they have to. You can't rely on cheapskate cost cutting at the time, when peace is signed, and then you lay everybody off. And then you have to get them all back again
Absolutely.
at the next war. And this is a lot of the problem. But unfortunately, in this country, in the UK, we never really learned that lesson. Witness, 1914, 1940, the same things are going on as went on in 1793. And it never changes. And the lessons of history, unfortunately, are somewhat lost. And I'm not a student of 21st century military by any stretch of imagination, but you look at the cutbacks, not just in our services, but other European and no doubt the American army too. Yeah. And how would that play out, particularly with current events? So I think there is definitely a continuity throughout the ages with many of these themes. And what I saw for the 1790s has so many parallels.
Absolutely. Well, when this book comes out, we're going to have you on to go into it in detail. And we'll have to have you on as well to talk about the first book in detail and drag our listeners kicking and screaming back into the 18th century. Although, in fairness, despite our name, we do cover the Revolutionary Wars as well. So you're in there already. All right. Well, thank you so very much and have a great rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Hello again, folks. Please remember, we're still fighting back from that Spotify nightmare. So please do 2 really simple and quick things to help us rise from the ashes. First, whack that subscribe button, especially if you're listening to this on Spotify, because you're likely to have been disconnected. But whatever platform you listen to your podcasts on, please just do it anyway to make sure you can stay connected to us. Second, like and leave a comment. It helps bump us up the algorithm to reconnect with our lost audience. If you're a fan of the show, you can leave a 5-star review. Go on, you know you want to. And did you know that you can now join a mailing list to get regular updates on all the news about newly released episodes, meetups for patrons, new lines of merch that have dropped, and all the hot gossip about what's coming soon? Because let's be honest, this show is all about the hot gossip. To sign up, go to www.thenapoleonicwars.net. Much love to all my Patreon supporters who are enjoying a rejuvenated and revitalized offering of perks on Patreon. Head to patreon.com/the Napoleonic Wars pod to find out how you can join a buzzing community of like-minded Napoleonic nerds who are enjoying things like courses, socials, a book club, green room access to recordings, early releases, exclusive episodes, and much more. Shout outs to our patrons who, at the time of recording this in mid-August 2024, are in the mentioned and dispatches tier: Rob Griffith, Brendan Teeling, Beatrice DeGraff, Lynn Dawson, Jamie Kingston, Lucy Tatner, Jim Deary, Josh Keeney, Colin Fieldhouse, Stephen Colson, Jim Getz, Stephen Gillen, Hugh Brennan, Alistair Campbell-Grieve, Andy Meakin, Mark Anscombe, Rob Coughlin, Bruins Girl, Noah Fink, Mark Trowbridge, Miles Reedy, Nick Overland, Graham Goodwin, Chris Pramas, Anthony Gumbau, Anonymous American, Martin Pisani, James Fluick, Natasha Hobday, Rod Schrager, Chris Kimball, Gary Dennis, David Graylick, Ted Andrews, Richard Anderson, Arthur Forgy, Sam Moore, Wyatt Pollock, Carol Dixon Smith, Roland Shark, Giovanni, Jean-Baptiste Merlon, and Darla Vincent. And the Admirals: John Haynes, Ryan Diamond, JC Kaiser, Bob Burnham, Mike Guest, Liam Telfer, Todd and Laird Campbell, Rachel Stark, Mark Duckers, David Maxwell, David Priest, Graham Callister, Sean Sullivan, Stephen Ashworth, Dan Hazelwood, Kate Walcombe, Clemens Beman, Charles McKay, Reto the Sci-Fi Fan, Tim Day, Mark Chestnut, Jason Morn, and the enigmatically named Zed. And I promise that's not just me boosting the numbers. We'll be back very soon, but until then, this has been the Napoleonic Wars pod. On behalf of myself, Liam, Luke, and Josh, take care of yourselves, folks. Stay well. And as always, thank you for listening.